He was already reaching for his gun when the woman everyone called a curse stepped in front of a running horse. Dust burst under her feet as she shoved the boy aside, the animal's hooves crashing down inches from where she'd stood. A sharp cry cut through the wind. Someone dropped a tin bucket. It clanged and rolled across the street. Wyatt froze on the porch, fingers tight at his side, watching her hit the ground and not move right away. Then she pushed up, slow, like it cost her something to breathe, and the whole town went quiet. What kind of woman runs toward danger when the world's been pushing her away? Stay with me. You'll want to see what happens next. The wind came in low across dry Mesa Ridge, dragging dust along the ground like something alive. It rattled the loose board on Wyatt Cole's porch and pushed against the door as if it had business inside. He stood there a long time before the wagon reached the gate. The driver didn't climb down right away, just flicked the reins once, then nodded toward the back. "That's your delivery." Wyatt didn't answer. He stepped off the porch, boots sinking slightly into the dry dirt, and walked up to the wagon. The horses shifted, uneasy with the wind. The door creaked open. She climbed down slow. Careful. One hand gripping the edge, the other holding onto a worn leather case like it mattered more than the ground beneath her feet. This wasn't what he had sent for. No bright dress, no ribbon, no nervous smile. Just a woman with tired shoes, dust pressed into the seams, and a face that didn't expect anything good to follow. Etta Brooks stood there and looked at him like she'd already made her decision about the world. The driver cleared his throat. "Name matches the paper." Wyatt didn't reach for the paper. The driver shrugged, spat into the dirt, and climbed back up. The wagon rolled off before either of them said a word, wheels grinding against stone until the sound disappeared over the ridge. Silence settled in its place. Etta didn't move toward the house. She set her case down beside her boot and kept her eyes level, not defiant, not soft, just steady. "I can take the morning coach back," she said. Her voice didn't carry far in the wind, but it held. Wyatt looked at her, then past her, out where the road bent out of sight. He reached up and adjusted the brim of his hat, buying himself a second that didn't help. Then he turned, walked back to the porch, and pushed the door open. It swung wide and stayed there. That was all. Etta waited another breath. Maybe two. Then she picked up her case and followed. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and coffee gone cold. A tin cup sat on the table, half full. A thin line of dust settled along the rim. A coat hung by the door, stiff with use. She stepped in and stopped near the wall, leaving space between them like it was something you could measure. Wyatt crossed to the table, lifted the cup, looked at it, then set it aside. He reached for another one, wiped it with the edge of his sleeve, and filled it from a tin kettle. He slid it across the table toward her. She stepped forward, slow as if the floor might give under her. Her fingers brushed the cup at the same time his did. Both of them pulled back. The cup rattled once against the wood, then went still. She took it, drank without looking up. The wind pressed against the walls again. Something loose outside knocked in a steady rhythm. Wyatt leaned his hip against the table and kept his eyes on the floorboards. There were words he could have used. None of them felt right. Etta set the cup down carefully. Not a sound, more than needed. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted," she said. It wasn't a challenge, just a fact. Wyatt nodded once, though she wasn't looking at him. He pushed himself off the table and walked past her, out onto the porch again. The sky had gone darker. The ridge cut a hard line against it. He stood there, hands resting on the rail, listening to the wind move through the scrub. Behind him, he heard her step back toward the door, the soft scrape of her case being lifted again. He closed his eyes for a moment, Then, without turning, he spoke. "I'd trade 10 herds." The words came rough, like they'd been sitting too long without use. He swallowed once. "For one night, you don't run." The wind carried the rest away. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the sound of the case setting back down. Not loud. Just enough. Wyatt opened his eyes. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. Inside the house, there were now 2 sets of footsteps, and for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. Morning came pale and slow over dry Mesa Ridge. Light slipped through the cracks in the boards and laid itself across the floor in thin lines. Wyatt was already gone. The bed by the wall hadn't been touched. The chair near the door was pushed back. Outside, the sound of a gate creaking once, then settling. Etta sat up on the narrow cot, listening. No voices. No movement. Just wind. She reached beneath the thin pillow and felt the handle of the knife she had set there before lying down. It was still where she left it. She let it go, stood, and crossed the room. The door opened with a soft pull. The yard had been worked before sunrise. The water barrel was filled to the rim. A stack of cut wood sat neat against the side of the house. The loose board on the porch had been fixed. New nails, driven straight. No note. No sign he expected thanks. Etta stepped out barefoot. The dirt still cool under her feet. She walked to the barrel, dipped her hand in, and watched the surface settle again. She stayed. Not because she decided anything, just because she didn't leave. By midday, she found a hammer and a length of wire tucked beneath the workbench. The back fence sagged where the posts leaned. She set her shoulder to it, drove one stake deeper, then another. The work was steady, honest. It didn't ask questions. When Wyatt came back, the sun was already low. Dust clung to his shirt and the cuffs of his pants. He stopped at the edge of the yard when he saw the fence line. He didn't say anything. He walked past her, set down a coil of rope by the door, and went inside. Etta followed after a moment. The room smelled faintly different, warmer. A pot sat on the stove, lid tilted just enough to let steam slip out. Wyatt didn't turn. He reached for a second bowl, filled it, and set it near the edge of the table. He stepped back. That was all. Etta stood there, then moved forward. She sat. Picked up the spoon. The broth was thin but hot, onions softened down to nothing. She ate slow. Wyatt leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes somewhere else. Not on her, not on the room. Outside, a loose hinge tapped once in the wind. After a while, she set the bowl down. "Thank you," she said. He gave a small nod. Nothing more. Later, when the light dropped and the sky turned the color of old iron, Wyatt stepped outside again. Etta watched through the gap in the boards. He walked out into the field, boots quiet in the dry grass. The cattle were scattered in the dark, shapes moving slow against the land. He stopped near the fence and stood there. His lips moved. No sound came. He counted anyway. Etta leaned her shoulder against the wall and listened to the quiet stretch between numbers she couldn't hear. When the wind picked up, it pushed the door open a few inches. The hinge gave with a long, tired groan. She crossed the room and set her hand against it, meaning to close it. Then she heard herself, soft, barely there. A line from an old hymn, carried more in breath than voice. She didn't know when she started. The sound stayed low, almost hidden under the wind, just enough to keep time with the rhythm in her chest. Outside, Wyatt went still. He didn't turn around. He didn't step closer. He just stood there, hat low, listening to something he wasn't meant to hear. Etta stopped. The quiet rushed back in. She closed the door. That night, she lay down with the knife under her pillow again. The boards creaked once as Wyatt crossed the room on his side of the wall. A cup set down. Boots pulled off. No words passed between them. But when she closed her eyes, the silence didn't press as hard. And somewhere beyond the thin wall, she knew he hadn't gone to sleep right away either. The next day carried on like the one before. Work first, words later, if at all. By late afternoon, the sky changed. It started as a thin line along the horizon, a darker shade cutting through the pale blue. Then the wind shifted, not stronger, sharper. It carried grit that stung when it hit the skin. Wyatt noticed it before the horses did. He stood by the fence, one hand resting on the post, eyes fixed west. The air tasted wrong, like metal and dust mixed together. Behind him, Etta stepped out of the house, wiping her hands on a cloth. She followed his gaze without asking. A low sound rolled across the land. Not thunder, something heavier. The horses caught it next. One jerked its head up, then another. Hooves shifted, restless. A nervous circle started near the far end of the pen. Wyatt moved quick. He climbed over the rail and dropped into the dirt, boots hitting hard. He raised his arms, tried to steady them, voice low but firm. Easy. Easy now. The wind cut him off. It came fast. A wall of sand rising, swallowing the ridge in a matter of breaths. The sky dimmed, color draining out of it. The first horse slammed into the fence. Wood cracked. Another reared, rope snapping loose. The pen turned into chaos, bodies colliding, breath loud and wild. Wyatt stepped forward, then stopped. Just like that. His hands stayed up, but his body didn't move. His eyes locked onto nothing. His breath came short, shallow, like he'd run too far without knowing it. The noise around him didn't reach him right. It came broken. Distant. The wind roared. A board tore loose somewhere behind the house and slammed against the wall. Etta ran. She didn't stop at the fence. She climbed over it, skirt catching on a nail, tearing as she dropped down beside him. Wyatt! He didn't turn. Another horse kicked, hoof striking the rail. The wood split further. One more hit, and the whole side would give. Etta grabbed his arm. He flinched, but not toward her, toward something else, something not there. She let go. For a second, she just stood there, dust whipping against her face, eyes stinging. The storm closed in around them, turning the world into a blur of brown and gray. The horses needed something, not force, not hands, something else. Etta drew in a breath that tasted like dirt. Then she started to sing. It came out small at first, barely louder than the wind pushing past her lips. A line she hadn't used in years, one her mother used to hum when the nights stretched too long. She held it steady, didn't rush it, didn't raise it. Just let it move. The nearest horse slowed. Its head dipped, ears twitching forward. Another followed. The circle broke, movement losing its edge. Etta kept going. Her voice found its place in the noise. Not louder, just clearer. The storm still raged. Sand struck her shoulders, her face. Her hair came loose, whipping across her eyes. She didn't stop. One by one, the horses eased. Hooves settled. Breath slowed. Wyatt stood where he was. Then something shifted. His hands lowered, slowly. His chest rose deep this time, not short and broken. His eyes blinked once, twice, like he was coming back from somewhere far off. The song carried on. He turned his head. Not much, just enough. Etta stood in front of him, barely steady against the wind, her voice holding the space together. When the last note faded, it didn't end all at once. It thinned out, like the storm itself beginning to pass. The pen went quiet. Only the wind remained, softer now, moving past instead of through. Wyatt looked at her. Really looked this time. Dust streaked her face. her dress torn at the hem, hands still slightly raised, as if she wasn't sure she was done yet. He swallowed, lifted a hand to his face and wiped at it, slow like something had gotten in his eye. He turned away before she could see more, picked up a length of rope from the ground, tied it back where the rail had split. Movement steady, controlled. Etta didn't speak. She stepped back, giving him space he didn't ask for, but seemed to need. The storm rolled on past them, dragging its weight toward the hills. When it was gone, the air felt empty, clean. Wyatt finished the knot and stepped out of the pen. He paused at the fence, one hand resting on the top rail. He didn't look back. But he didn't leave right away either. Etta stood there a moment longer, then climbed out after him. They walked toward the house without touching, without speaking. But something had changed. The space between them didn't feel as wide, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Etta didn't keep her eyes on the ground as she walked. They rode into Red Clay Junction 2 mornings later. Wyatt took the lead, his horse steady under him, a coil of rope tied behind the saddle. Etta followed on the smaller mare, hands firm but quiet on the reins. The road into town was dry and rutted, wagon tracks baked hard under the sun. By the time they reached the general store, the bell above the door rang once, sharp and clear. Inside it smelled of flour, leather, and coffee that had been sitting too long on the stove. A man behind the counter looked up, then looked again, slower this time. Wyatt nodded once. Flour. Nails. The man moved without a word, scooping from a barrel, weighing it out on a scale that creaked with each shift. Etta stepped to the counter. She reached into her pocket and counted out coins, one by one. They slipped once against her fingers and tapped against the wood louder than they should have. Someone near the window leaned in. "Seen her before," a voice said, not loud, but not quiet either. Another voice answered, "Kansas." A third, closer now. 2 husbands, both gone. The room didn't stop, but it slowed. Etta kept her hand on the coins, didn't look up, didn't move faster. The shopkeeper tied the sack with a piece of twine and slid it forward. His eyes didn't meet hers. Wyatt stood a few feet away, a paper in his hand, reading something that didn't seem to hold his attention. He didn't step in. Not yet. Outside, the street was lined with wagons and tied horses. A boy ran past, kicking up dust. Somewhere, a hammer struck metal in a steady rhythm. Etta stepped out with the sack held close. A small stone hit the dirt near her boot. Another one followed, striking the side of the wooden trough with a dull knock. She didn't turn. She walked. Behind her, a laugh, quick and sharp, then cut off when a shadow crossed the street. Wyatt. He stood there, hat low, eyes moving across the faces that had been watching. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The space around Etta cleared, just enough. They walked back to the horses. Wyatt took the sack from her without asking, tied it behind the saddle, and checked the strap twice. She mounted without help. They rode out the way they came, dust rising behind them in a long, thin trail. Back at the house, the wind had settled. The fence held. The door creaked the same as before. Etta stepped inside first. She set her things down, folded her shawl. Then she reached for the small leather case she had brought with her and opened it. Inside there wasn't much: a Bible, a comb, a folded piece of paper she didn't look at for long. She closed it again. Wyatt stood in the doorway, one hand resting against the frame. She didn't turn. "I'll leave in the morning," she said. No anger, no weight. Just the same steady tone she'd had the first night. Wyatt stayed where he was. The room held still. He pushed off the frame and stepped inside, boots quiet on the boards. He stopped a few feet from her. "I'd trade 10 herds. The words came easier this time, not softer, just clearer, just to know you'd stay. Etta's hand rested on the case. She didn't answer, but she didn't pack it either. Morning broke before either of them slept much. The sound came first. Hooves, more than one, coming fast. Wyatt was already on his feet when the first rider pulled up hard at the gate. Dust rose in a thick cloud behind them, hanging in the air like smoke. 6 men. At the front, a broad-shouldered man in a dark coat sat straight in the saddle, eyes fixed on the house. Clyde Mercer. He swung down slow, boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. 2 others followed, one holding a roll of papers, the other watching everything with a hand resting near his belt. More people gathered along the road. Not close, but close enough. Etta stepped out onto the porch. Wyatt moved beside her. Not in front. Not behind. Just there. Clyde's voice carried without effort. "We've come for her." No one asked who he meant. The papers were unrolled, edges snapping in the wind. Words about claims, about property, about things decided far from this ridge. Etta didn't move. Her hand tightened once at her side. From the road, a wagon shifted. A child slipped down, feet hitting the dirt wrong, stumbling into the open space between horses. One of the mounts jerked, startled by the movement. Its front legs lifted, then came down hard, too close. Etta moved before anyone else did. She crossed the distance in 3 strides, caught the boy by the shoulder, and pulled him clear. Her footing slipped in the dust. She went down hard, shoulder taking the fall. The horse came down where she had been a breath before. The boy cried out, then clung to her, shaking. Silence followed. Not complete, but enough. The men at the gate stopped shifting. The paper in Clyde's hand lowered a fraction. Etta stayed where she was for a second, breath held tight, then pushed herself up, brushing dust from her sleeve without looking at anyone. She set the boy on his feet and stepped back. No words, no explanation, just the sound of the wind moving through Dry Mesa Ridge again, and every eye on her, seeing something they hadn't expected to see. The boy's mother rushed forward, pulling him close, hands shaking as she checked his arms, his face. He clung to her, eyes wide, still trying to understand what had almost happened. Etta stepped back, brushing dust from her sleeve again. Her shoulder stiffened when she moved it, but she didn't show it. She didn't look at Wyatt. Clyde Mercer folded the papers once, then again. Slow, measured. "That doesn't change anything," he said. But his voice didn't carry the same weight. Wyatt moved then. Not fast. Not sudden. He stepped down from the porch, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud, and walked until he stood between Clyde and Etta. Not touching her, just close enough that the line was clear. The wind pulled at his coat. Clyde's eyes narrowed. "You think this makes her clean? You think folks forget what follows her?" Wyatt didn't answer right away. He looked past Clyde, at the people gathered, the ones who had whispered, the ones who had watched. Then he spoke. "She didn't bring death." The words came low, rough, but steady. He paused, like he was choosing each one before letting it go. She walked through it. No one moved. The man by the wagon shifted his weight. The shopkeeper from town looked down at his boots. The woman holding the boy tightened her grip, then stepped forward without thinking. "We'll take him home," she said, voice quieter now. Not to Wyatt, not to Clyde, just to the moment. Another man came with a bucket of water, set it near the steps without a word. Clyde looked around, waiting for something to turn back in his favor. Nothing did. He let out a breath through his nose, sharp and short. The papers in his hand dropped to his side. "This isn't finished," he said. But it didn't sound like a promise. He turned, swung back into the saddle, and pulled the reins hard. The others followed, dust rising again as they rode off the way they'd come. The road emptied. The crowd thinned slow, like it didn't want to be seen leaving all at once. Wyatt stood there a moment longer. Then he turned. Etta had already stepped back onto the porch. One hand rested against the post, steadying herself. The other hung at her side, fingers flexing once, then still. He climbed the steps. Up close, he could see where the fabric at her shoulder had torn. Dust clung there, darker where it met skin. He didn't reach for her right away. "Sit," he said. She did, no argument, no question. He went inside, came back with a basin and a cloth. The water inside it moved with each step, catching the light. He set it down beside her. His hands worked careful, slower than they needed to be. He cleaned the cut without pressing too hard, like he was measuring each touch. Etta watched the horizon. Didn't pull away. Didn't lean in either. When he finished, he wrapped the cloth around her shoulder and tied it off, fingers steady despite the wind that kept tugging at everything. On the small table near the door, a piece of wood lay where it hadn't been before. Rough edges, fresh cut, 4 words carved into it. "I'm proud of you." Etta looked at it. Didn't pick it up, but she saw it. Night came soft. The wind settled into something quieter, moving through the grass instead of against it. Inside, the house held its usual stillness. Only now it felt different. Full. Etta lay on the cot, turned toward the wall. Wyatt sat in the chair by the table, hat set aside, hands resting on his knees. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. Morning broke clear. Light came in stronger than before, stretching across the floor, reaching the far wall. Outside, the land looked the same, dry, wide, waiting. Etta stepped out onto the porch first. Wyatt followed a moment later. They stood side by side, not too close, not far apart. The horizon sat quiet in front of them. Wyatt shifted his weight once, then looked at her. "You still running?" Etta didn't answer right away. She watched the line where the sky met the earth. Let the question settle. Then she turned her hand over, just enough that her fingers brushed against his. Stayed there. "Not tonight." Wyatt nodded once. That was all. The wind moved past them, carrying the day forward, and this time neither of them stepped away. If you stood there long enough, you might start to feel it too. The quiet kind of peace that doesn't come easy. The kind that shows up after dust, after doubt, after a long stretch of nights where leaving would have been simpler. Maybe you've known a moment like that. A place where you could have turned back, packed up, chosen the road instead of the risk. And maybe, like Etta, you stayed anyway. Not because it was safe, not because it was certain, but because something in you said this, right here, was worth holding on to. And maybe you've been Wyatt too, carrying things you don't say out loud, letting silence do the talking until one day, it isn't enough. Until you realize that standing beside someone can mean more than anything you ever managed to put into words. Out on that ridge, there were no promises, no grand speeches, just 2 people who had every reason to walk away and didn't. Sometimes, that's all love really is. Not the kind that arrives loud and shining, but the kind that stays when it would be easier to go. If this story found something in you, I'd like to hear it. What do you think makes someone stay? And if you feel like sitting with more stories like this, quiet ones, rough around the edges, but real, you're always welcome here. There's more waiting just beyond the next horizon.